Hello, everyone. I don't know if anyone's on with me yet. I'm hoping that you'll have some answers for me. Um, and I'm just picking up an email. What's that about? Okay. It's just told me that I'm live. Great. Okay. So here we are on my own at the moment. Let me tell you a little bit about myself. So if you're watching this later, you'll be able to pick it up. My name is Lena Fenton, and I've been a counsellor since 1994. Now, for about the first 10 years of my working life as a counsellor, I worked almost exclusively with adult women, survivors of childhood sexual abuse or sexual assaults, victims of paedophile rings, that sort of thing. I worked with people with dissociative identity disorders, borderline personality disorders, people, all kinds of things that are in effect the long-term effects of sustained long-term sexual abuse. I needed to diversify because I think if you do one thing for too long, you get a little bit stale with it. So I trained as a life coach initially. Then I did a course in NLP, neuro-linguistic programming, which is really about how you change your mindset. So it's a kind of a behavioral program, which really gets you to do different kinds of exercises to help you change your mindset. Other work I've done is I have done some training in sexual abuse. This was back in the 90s. I have worked at a London women's prison. I worked there as a drugs counsellor, did that for 2 years. A little bit later on, I worked with a women's charity in South London, and there we were offering 12 to 16 sessions, so what I would call short-term, really, therapy to women who had been either domestic slavery, had experienced domestic slavery, had been trafficked and had been made to be sexual slaves, had been tortured for being lesbians, who had suffered domestic violence, domestic abuse of all kinds, and so on and so on. So really quite a lot of the heavy end, I guess, of the kind of human problems, issues that is out there in the world. Around about 2010, I decided to qualify to study couples counselling, and 4 years later, I qualified as a couples psychotherapist, and then I followed that with a master's in psychosexual therapist with a focus on couples. Although I work with individuals too. And that's really the bulk of my work now. I'm either working with couples or individuals who are having relationship problems, who are having intimacy problems, and so on and so forth. Since this coronavirus situation, I have been working almost exclusively online and seeing people online. So everybody that I normally work with face to face is now also seeing me online, having sessions online. I think most people who can do that now. And that's probably the way I'm going to continue to work, certainly for the foreseeable future. What else? So I guess that maybe what you've gleaned from what I've been saying so far is just how much, I guess, my working life has really been around working with women and now with couples. And I'm very much, it's interesting because I don't feel I'm a feminist, but I think I'm very much a humanist. I see that both men and women need to be emancipated. I think that men are repressed in their way, and women are too. We all conform to cultural norms in one way or another, and some of those norms are actually really very oppressive. And one of the things that I think has been very much one of my pet peeves, maybe, bugbear, I don't know what other phrase to use really, but one of the things that I find most difficult to deal with, not on a personal level, but in working, when I'm working, is pornography. Now, I'm not moralistic. It's not about that. I think that if pornography is done fair and square, and people are getting paid fair and square, and no one's getting damaged, then that's fine. Just like, I believe that people should have the freedom to sell sex if they want to. I think that should be made legal, simply because these things happen anyway. Okay. And it is known that prostitution, for instance, is the oldest profession, so they call it. And I think that as a society, we are really quite hypocritical in the way that we criminalize certain things. And I think it's worse in a way, because actually by criminalizing certain things, you actually create a great deal more possibility for abuse and exploitation. So coming back to pornography, the thing I think that upsets me about it is the fact that it has become, in my view, this is just my point of view, it has become the thing that is used to learn about sex, is used to, instead of sex, is used to teach people what they should behave like sexually. And when you consider that everything you see in a pornographic film is fake, that it's as fake as any Walt Disney cartoon character. And that's fine, except that we then use that, or people, I don't, but people then use that as their benchmark against which, well, if that woman is willing to do that on there, I want you to do it as well, whether you want to or not, whether you like it or not. Somehow it's the new norm. Okay, so for instance, the fashion now is to have your genitals shaved. And it's my belief, again, my personal opinion, that particular fashion is born out of pornography. I think that that's where it first started, and that's fine. Again, it's no problem. It's not like I have anything about people shaving or whatever they do. It's that it's actually setting the standard for what a man is supposed to be like sexually. It's setting the standard for what a woman is supposed to be like sexually. Men are supposed, there are so many myths born out of that. Like, and part of the, some of the problems that I see in my practice is that men have this concept that a real man can get an erection at any time. A real man will ejaculate copious amounts of semen. All these standards, which are fake, are false. It's not real. A real man is supposed to last God knows how long, and so on and so forth. And equally for women, there's this myth now that women are supposed to also in some way squirt, or the female version of ejaculation. It's ludicrous. And I just want to put something in here. These are my personal or professional opinions, and I don't wish to offend anyone or have anyone be upset with me, but there it is. So one of the things that happens a lot in my consulting room is that I try to re-educate people into what's real and what's natural and what's unique maybe about them. And it's really quite difficult to fight against the onslaught of continuous, ongoing false information. And I guess it's a little bit like the coronavirus. There's an awful lot of false information about that too. I am going to be producing a short course on female sexuality to try and address some of those issues and to help perhaps women know their own bodies a little better and what they can expect from themselves, I think is really important. I'm not, it would appear that no one is joining me, and I feel as though I am just talking here by myself. I don't think I can sustain that for a whole hour. So if I don't get any questions very soon, I will probably cut this a little bit short. What else can I talk to you about? One of the things that I work a lot with is sexual dysfunctions, and I talked a little bit about those in my previous video last week. But really, I wanted these broadcasts to be there for people to bring their questions or problems, and I could talk about them. Talk about not the people, but about the problem in broad and general terms. This is the whole purpose of this kind of live streaming that I'm doing. So let's talk a little bit about relationships. One of the things that I think also possibly needs to be discussed is the way in which we set our relationships up. What do I mean by that? I think that there are various stages of a relationship, and one of the first stages is obviously when you meet, naturally, right? But once you start to get into a relationship, one of the things that I think doesn't happen often enough, and I'm not saying it never happens, I'm saying it doesn't happen often enough, is that people discuss with each other what they actually want the relationship to look like, what kind of relationship they want. For instance, people, I think, have very superficial or very minimal discussions about faithfulness and monogamy. Now, if you get into a situation, for instance, where you're fairly certain you want to spend the rest of your life with this person, one of the things that I believe each couple should really discuss in some depth is what happens if 3, 5, 7 years down the line, they meet somebody whom they're really attracted to and have a synergy with and a connection with, and they begin to maybe fall in love or have an infatuation. Now, I think that it's a good idea to think about this in terms of when rather than if, because if you're going to spend anything, upwards of 5 to 50 years with another human being, it is unlikely that there's never going to be anyone else that you'll find attractive. It is unlikely that at some point you won't feel a really strong connection with somebody else, a romantic connection. I mean, I think you can have all kinds of affection and care and love even for other human beings on all kinds of levels. But there are some very specific romantic attractions which I think are inevitable. And I think that the idea that you can fall in love once and never ever feel those kinds of feelings for anyone else is probably too idealistic. So the reality is that most people in this day and age have, on average, maybe 2 to 3 long-term relationships, 2 or 3 marriages. And people struggle in all kinds of ways in those marriages, and eventually they break up and there will be somebody else. But that's an aside. Coming back to the beginning of your relationship, you're just setting out. Yes, you've moved in together. Have you really thought about how you're going to manage if your partner were to be unfaithful, for example? Or if you were to find somebody so attractive that you would really want to be intimate, go to bed with them. I think it's worth talking about and thinking about how you would then manage that circumstance. Because you might, for instance, want to think about what you can guarantee about your behavior. Can you really guarantee that you'll always be completely faithful? And if not, if there's any chance, as is possibly the case, that you might find somebody else really attractive or really connecting with, how do you deal with that within the relationship that you're already in? So I think that's what you need to think about when you're setting up a relationship. Can you guarantee that you'll have the conversation with your present partner before you do anything that you might regret with an outside person? And if so, how will you manage that? Can you discuss, for instance, with each other, whether you would at that point seek some therapy? Or, is it the case that if either of you ever finds anybody else really attractive and really getting a connection with them, that means the end of your relationship? Because some people believe that if they find anybody else attractive, it means they don't love their current partner anymore. Now, I'm not of that opinion personally, because I think that we're a social animal. I think biology is very strong, driving us. And I think that it's possible to have many loves, actually. And people demonstrate that because such a high percentage of people are unfaithful. That's a reality. And the other reality is that only about 50% of marriages actually last. So I think that in preparing for a long-term relationship, one ought to think about the kind of roadblocks or obstacles or, profound emotional difficulties that you might encounter and what you can guarantee about that in yourself, in your own behavior. How would you want to behave? What kind of strategies are you going to put into place? Or you might be the kind of person who already knows that you don't want to be monogamous, you want to be polyamorous, you want to have multiple partners. You might be happy with your own partner also having other people. What kind of would you want a hierarchy within that or not? Or is it more like a you do what you want when you want kind of thing? you need to think about all these things for yourself. And sometimes it's really not very easy to unravel all of that kind of stuff within yourself. And sometimes talking it through with somebody else, somebody impartial like myself, like a counselor, relationship counselor, is really very useful, because if nothing else, it helps you unravel your own thinking about it all. Okay, so I have a question. Hello, the question reads, how would you approach bringing that sort of conversation up, especially if your partner already feels insecure about your affections at times? Well, that's interesting, isn't it? Because that question suggests that the relationship is already established, and my advice is that actually it's a kind of conversation you really would be best to be had at the very beginning of a relationship. But I think perhaps the way that I would, if you're already in an established relationship, then I think that the way that I would think about that, or the way that I might approach that, is by presenting it as, so I'm thinking about our future. I'm thinking about how we might be in our future, and what kind of things we can agree to for how the relationship goes on. I think that would be maybe my introduction. I'm not quite sure where would you take it from there. It depends on what you want. So let's say, for instance, you're in a monogamous relationship and you want to open it up. Your relationship is already fairly established, and you want to open it up so that both parties could be free to see other people, but that your parameters there are going to be that you can see other people for sex, but not for relationships. That's, I think, probably that's the most common kind of open relationship I've come across. And so you might want to ask them then, having kind of put it in the context of the longer term future of the relationship, you might then want to ask them about their feelings in terms of other people that they've seen that they like, and what that does for them, and so on. And try and kind of help them normalize the fact that we are attracted to people outside of our main relationship. And then you work out what you would want to do together. I think I said in a previous broadcast that for myself, one of the things I have guaranteed my partner is that, if that were to happen, the first thing I would do is talk about it with him. I would look at, what's going on in our relationship, and what, what it all means, and possibly go to therapy as well. So you can't plan for every kind of contingency. That's part of the problem. But you can begin to think about it and open it up, and begin to see whether, because the thing about a relationship, that I think the thing that makes it most solid is having shared values. And fidelity is very much, but both people should be on the same page with that. Whatever variety of loyalty or open, or whatever variety it is, both people should be on the same page. That's what makes for a sound relationship. If one person wants an open relationship and the other one doesn't, it's not going to work, because somebody's going to be both of you are going to be very unhappy, because either way, one of you is not going to be satisfied or fulfilled. I think that happens quite a lot for people who are bisexual, for instance. It can be very difficult to find another person who perhaps is also bisexual. Often, I've had situations, for instance, where one partner's been bisexual and one partner has not, and they haven't wanted to open the relationship up. And that can be very difficult for the bisexual partner. So all of that really ought to be worked out right at the beginning, and not, as often I've seen in my consulting room, often I've seen this years later, 5-10 years into the relationship, this issue comes up about, well, I'm bisexual, what do I do about seeing people other people, whichever way around. So that's I'm not sure if that answers your question there. I'm just picking up on the idea here of being your partner being insecure about affections at times. I think that's obviously another level of complications, because to open up a relationship, I think you do probably need to have an emotional security between you, that but that would so that it forms a stable basis, because I think otherwise things can get quite imbalanced. So I would, if there isn't that level of emotional security, I would look to build that first, perhaps. This is where, of course, we're talking about an established relationship. It doesn't contradict what I said earlier, that perhaps this could have been dealt with much earlier, when the relationship is new. And maybe that's difficult. It's difficult when a relationship is new. You don't want to do or say anything that jeopardizes it. So it can be difficult. But I think vital. It's one of the reasons, however, why one of the services I provide is premarital counselling. And it's intended for new relationship. It's not just for people who are about to get married. It is intended for new relationships where people are struggling, perhaps to set a good foundation on how to go on. That maybe they come from different cultures, or maybe two people come from different sexual orientations. What I mean by that, like I said earlier, is that you've got somebody who is heterosexual and somebody who is bisexual. And and they're trying to figure out how that can all work. At the other end of that, there is, of course, the ending of the relationship, and so some of my work is also about helping people to separate with the least possible damage, with the least possible hurt, so that it can be, inverted commas, a good separation, a good divorce, a good parting. I think that's something else that people really don't know how to do very well, and it is often way more damaging than is necessary. I'm kind of conscious that we're coming up to about 28 minutes. I'm not getting any further questions. I think I might give it just a couple of more minutes and then end this session here. And of course, I'm back on Thursday. Now, there's going to be a revised time. I think it's going to have to be 3:30 instead of 3 o'clock each Tuesday and Wednesday. But like today, unless people are coming on board, I will probably only run it for about a half an hour, and I'll put that out on social media as well. Of course, this is possible to re-watch this. Is that the right phrase? To see this, it will stay on my channel, and so it can be looked at again by anybody who happens to pass by. Okay, what else can I say? I think I will leave it there. And yeah, and perhaps see you, those that are spoken and those that haven't, perhaps see you again on Thursday. But if not, certainly let other people know that I'm here, asking any and every question you have about, those that I can answer, that you have about relationships and intimacy. Okay, bye for now.